Well, everybody's wanting to know, where in the world is Hills Rising? So I'm going to tell you what has happened. But the show has been suspended. Actually, the entire YouTube channel for The Hill has been suspended for 7 days until Thursday, March 10th for violating, allegedly, YouTube's election misinformation policies. So what happened was, on February 24th, there was a segment that aired. Well, actually, this actually goes back a year. When there's actually 3 strikes essentially that led up to this, 3 incidences that led up to a major news organization having their YouTube channel suspended from uploading or live streaming for 7 entire days. What led up to this is unbelievable and really should call into question the entire idea of what is misinformation, what is spreading misinformation, what is free speech in America, what is being a free society and a free people. All of this is called into question over YouTube now suspending the Hill's YouTube page. So what happened was, a year ago, The Hill aired unedited raw footage from CPAC. That's right. Airing a Republican convention and speech being held, speeches at this Republican convention resulted in a strike against the channel. They say, oh, this is misinformation. And according to YouTube's policies, you have to immediately put up some sort of a banner saying this is misinformation, or this is what's the real information, or somebody has to interject and immediately say, that's misinformation. So like some talking head has to pop into the screen and say, and that's misinformation that you've just heard. So airing raw footage of Republicans speaking it's at this point, I was going to say or Democrats, but at this point it is, we all know, mostly targeted towards right-wing speech. But of course that can flip, and it had been liberal speech in the past. It sure will be liberal speech in the future. Certainly lots and lots of anti-establishment progressives have been censored on YouTube and other big tech platforms. But just airing raw footage of these speeches, unless you're going to put a disclaimer on those speeches, or unless you're going to have somebody interject and immediately give a rebuttal to whatever that quote unquote misinformation was, then that results in you being the spreader of misinformation, according to YouTube. So a year ago, The Hill aired CPAC's raw footage from CPAC, got a strike on the channel. The Hill did it again. So, it's a news organization, and you should be able to air speeches from politicians and other leaders. That is newsworthy. Even if they're saying total misinformation, crackpot stuff, it doesn't matter. They need to be able to say it, and we need to be able to hear it. That is what being a free people and a free society is. And it's newsworthy. You deserve and ought to know what your political leaders are saying, even if it's totally nuts. And that goes for both sides of the aisle. You have a right to know the crazy crap these politicians are saying, right? Okay. Or you might agree with all of it, and you might not think any of it's crazy at all. That is you being a free person in a free America. That is what a free society is. But apparently not anymore. So that resulted in a second strike on the channel. And then it turned out that February 24th, a segment aired. I was not on the segment of Rising. It was actually Robbie Suave, my co-host Robbie Suave, and Ryan Grimm did a segment. Emily Jashinsky was on the segment with them. So this was the segment that aired. It was February 24th. And during this segment, they were talking specifically about Donald Trump and Donald Trump praising Putin and Putin's strength and all that, how Trump gets when it comes to talking about Putin and Russia and the war and whatnot. Trump was on Laura Ingram's show. There he is. You can see the little phone call icon in the bottom. He was talking to Laura Ingram, talking about Putin's threats. And in that conversation, he said, he made statements about the election. I'm not going to repeat what he said because here I am on YouTube, so I don't myself want to get banned for spreading misinformation. So for spreading election misinformation. So he made a claim that we all know he makes about the election during this phone call with Laura Ingram. He says it almost knee-jerk. He always says it. We all know he says it. It's not actually news. Nor do I think anybody suddenly, because they hear it from Trump today, thinks, wow, maybe there's something to what he's saying, and I got to look more into that, and I'm going to believe him, and I'm going to agree with him. I think at this point, everybody in America knows, really a lot of people around the world know what Trump thinks. And so it's not actually news, nor is it really, at this point, I think, spreading misinformation. But nonetheless, it is against YouTube's misinformation. Here's actually their election misinformation policies. So they say right here, certain types of misleading or deceptive content with serious risk of egregious harm are not allowed on YouTube. Okay. What is considered serious risk of egregious harm? That would be my first question. What do you consider that? Believing that something is real or not? Is that egregious harm? This includes certain types of misinformation that can cause real-world harm, like certain types of technically manipulated content and content interfering with democratic processes. Okay, so technically, what did they say here? It was technically manipulated content. Okay, so that is stuff that is like altered in some way. So somebody is made to look like they've said something or do something that they didn't actually do. That would be technically, right, that would be a violation. I could understand that. That would certainly be misinformation if you're making somebody appear like they've said or done something that they didn't actually say or do. And then they go on to say here, oh, sorry, not that one. No, not that one. Oh, here we are. That you will find, and content interfering with democratic processes. Okay, so what is content interfering with democratic processes? I'm not even sure what this is. So this is where things get really tricky because what interferes with democratic process. So I would say what interferes with democratic processes is if you made a statement, for example, and you came out and you were, me or a news broadcast, and you say, guess what, everybody? Oh my gosh, breaking news. The election has been moved, right? It's no longer going to be on November 4th. They're changing the date. It is now going to be held on November 16th. Show up to the polls. Okay, that obviously would be interfering with democratic processes. You're telling people don't show up to the polls on election day. Instead, go on this other day that's not election day. So basically, you did not get an opportunity to vote because you were given election misinformation that would then lead you to not vote on the day that you should be voting on. That makes sense, right? Or if you say the election location has moved and this is really where you need to head. Or, oh, guess what? You're going to get a mail-in ballot and you're not, let's say. So don't worry about needing to go and take the time off and go and find your local polling spot. So I can understand all of that being election misinformation that interferes in the democratic processes. Or to say a certain candidate dropped out and so therefore you don't need to vote for that candidate anymore. I could understand that. Now, you could even say what would be interfering in election in the democratic process would be lying about your opponent. But that happens all the time. Right? They're always lying about each other. They're always smearing each other. Yet that's not considered interfering with the democratic process, even though I would make an argument that that is much more interfering than many of the other things you could potentially, like running, they were saying, that there was all this Russian election misinformation or interference that happened on Facebook. They were buying ads and they were spreading misinformation. But what kind of misinformation were they spreading that interfered in the democratic election process? Like I mentioned, did they say the date moved, the poll location moved, this candidate dropped out? If they're going to smear somebody, if they're going to make you believe that a person is, heading some evil cabal, I suppose, that sort of mudslinging and lying about each other has been going on for a long time, probably since the beginning of elections, since the beginning of democracy in general. So I'm not really clear what they mean when they say, certain types of technically manipulated content and content interfering with democratic processes. Okay. But nonetheless, apparently Trump making the claim we always know he makes is somehow in violation of this. Now, they go on and they're more specific. They say what these policies mean for you. So if you're posting content, don't post elections-related content on YouTube if it fits any of the descriptions noted below. Voter suppression. So content aiming to mislead voters about the time, place, means, or eligibility requirements for voting or false claims that could materially... So, right, I just mentioned that. Okay. Candidate eligibility. I think I mentioned that as well. I didn't even read over this before I'm showing it to you. So probably should have done that. Let's see what else they say. Content that advances false claims related to the technical eligibility requirements for current political candidates and setting elected government officials to serve in office. Okay, so, this person's no longer running. They're not eligible to run. So I guess maybe birther, right? Say, oh, this person's not even an American citizen. They're not eligible. Don't even vote for him. Maybe that. Incitement to interfere with democratic processes. So content encouraging others to interfere with democratic processes. This includes obstructing or interrupting voting procedure. Okay, I can see that. So if you say to people, get out there and, we can't let this election happen. Find your local polling place and destroy the box or something, right? Or protest so people can't get in and vote. We're going to surround the place so that no one can get in. Okay, that makes sense to me as well. Distribution of hacked material. So content that contains hacked info, the disclosure of which may interfere with democratic processes. Okay, let's read that one more time. Distribution of hacked materials. Content that contains hacked info, the disclosure of which may interfere with democratic processes. I don't agree with that one. It's a crime for you to hack, fine. If you want to prosecute the person who's hacked, Julian Assange did not hack, by the way. But if you actually have a hacker that actually committed a crime that's essentially breaking and entering into somebody else's property, right? It's a digital breaking and entering. That's a crime. But what they find when they enter and break into your home or into your computer, it could be a public interest. Could very well be a public interest. So I don't agree with that policy, and I think that in and of itself is an infringement on the public's right to know information that is pertinent to the public to know, right? Pertinent for the public to know. So I don't agree with that one. Election integrity. Content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches change the outcome of select past national elections. Oh, whoa. Read that again. Content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches change the outcome of select past national elections after final election results are officially certified. This currently applies to any past U.S. presidential election and the 2021 German federal election. Interesting. So you can call into question any other election. Sorry, my phone's ringing. You can call into question other elections. So you could say Putin wasn't actually elected. You could call into question other sham elections that our government or other people want to call sham elections around the world. You could say, oh, well, Syria doesn't we hear these things all the time. So I'm just repeating ones that we've heard often, like, there wasn't a real election in Crimea. That one wasn't real when people voted on the referendum on whether or not they were going to join Russia. Putin is not actually elected. They say this about practically any place they don't like. That's what they say. It's a sham. Iran, we just heard this recently, that the Iranian election, and maybe these are sham elections. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying that making the claim is only allowed in certain circumstances. So they're determining as a platform which ones are legitimate and which ones are not. They're not allowing us, the public, to debate whether or not they're legitimate. That's the big key there. So we're allowed to debate certain elections. We could debate all day about the Iranian elections, but we're not allowed to debate presidential elections here in the United States or the German federal election. But we can, so that is select. So only select ones can you actually dispute certain past national elections, they say. Interesting. Don't agree with that either. We should be able to debate any and all of them openly, freely. And you should be able to debate whether or not the earth is flat or round. You should be able to debate the moon landing, anything you want. And you could think somebody's crazy and you could just disregard them, fine. But you should be able to have the conversation and debate it even openly. Okay, so this is their final. So election integrity here says claims that a candidate only won a swing state. So these are the examples specifically under election integrity. Claims that a candidate only won a swing state in the U.S. 2020 presidential election due to voting machine glitches that changed votes. Okay, so we know that's specific to the Trump and Biden election. Claims that dead people voted in numbers that changed the outcome of the U.S. 2016 presidential election. Claims that fake ballots were dumped to give one candidate enough votes to win a state in a past U.S. presidential election. Content advancing false claims that widespread fraud, error, or glitches changed the outcome of the German parliamentary elections, delegitimizes the formation of the new government or the election and appointment of the next German chancellor. Says we may allow content that violates the election integrity policy noted on this page if content includes additional context in the video, audio, title, or description. This is not a free pass to promote misinformation. Additional context may include countervailing views or if the purpose of the content is to condemn, dispute, or satirize misinformation that violates our policies. Remember, these are just some examples, and don't post content if you think it might violate these policies. Please note these policies also apply to external links in your content. This can include clickable URLs, verbally directing users to other sites in video as well as other forms. So if you want to say like, I can't say it here, but I can say it in the below video, then that is where you would then go, then you point to that URL and they're saying you can't do that. You can't direct people to a place where you're going to be spreading that misinformation on YouTube. So you can't say the misinformation, or can you direct people? Okay, so what they're thinking, so the Hill Rising and just the Hill on the YouTube page posted raw footage of CPAC twice, and then posted a clip that was aired on Fox News' Laura Ingraham, where Donald Trump is talking about Putin. And then at the end, he, of course, calls into question the U.S. election, because he always does that. That is what he does. And so what we have to say then, and I'll say it now because we have to all say it, and there has to be a disclaimer on all the videos, is the 2020 election was not rigged. It was a legitimate election. Joe Biden is president. That is what they require all of us to say in all of these videos now. Immediately after a statement like this, it has to happen in real time. Or a disclaimer needs to be placed on the bottom of the video, or a warning, a trigger warning of some kind. Somewhere a warning has to be, or a note saying this was not a sham, this wasn't, that was a misinformation, claim of some kind. Or the conversation needs to be around the false claim, and it needs to be condemning the false claim. So the entirety of the conversation. So we know that CNN, for example, is allowed to talk about Trump's claims and place Trump's clips in their stuff all the time, because you know that they're going to be having quickly and immediately a discussion about, he's crazy, and the election is obvious. Joe Biden is president, and Joe Biden won the president, and it was a legitimate election, and yada yada yada. So if you don't immediately, now the reason why Rising didn't do that is because that's not what the segment was about. The segment was about Putin and Ukraine and Russia and Trump and the things Trump was saying about Putin and Ukraine and Russia. Trump just happened to mention his claim at the very end of the clip. He just quickly, in passing, he wasn't even talking about that, but he was just in passing mentioning his claim that we all know he makes. And that ended up getting the channel suspended for 7 days. So now the Hills Rising cannot post any videos at all or live stream until Thursday, March 10th. That is what happened. And this should outrage every single major media company. This should outrage every single person who prides themselves on being an American in a free society and a free people. This is an assault on all press. This means that you cannot, if you are a news organization, just air raw footage, because any raw footage may or may not have some sort of claim in it from a U.S. politician or leader or president at the time, or whoever that person is. That person might make a claim, and if that person makes a claim that is against the platform's policies, then really it sounds more and more like YouTube is trying to kick off political content from their platform. Because if you can't air raw footage of CPAC or even Donald Trump and an interview that he has, which is absolutely, undoubtedly, indisputably newsworthy, all of it is, then it looks more and more like YouTube is actually just trying to clear itself from political content on the platform. But that is a dangerous game for YouTube to play, because ultimately the world will not stop at politics. Right now, the reason why YouTube censors is because they're being pressured. They're pressured by people, but mostly they're pressured by politicians. And this is a First Amendment issue. Yes, they're a private platform. Sure, they're allowed to run their platform however they want. but not if they're getting undue pressure from the government. That is when it crosses the line, and that's when it becomes a First Amendment issue. So if YouTube is adopting these policies because they don't want to piss off US politicians, they're afraid of regulation, that is a First Amendment issue. That is an assault on our freedoms as a free people, period. And if YouTube is doing it because they're being pressured by society, well, we all know how cancel culture works, because eventually it comes for you. And that's what YouTube is trying to avoid, right? They're trying to avoid the mob coming after them. So they're wiping away anything that may or may not make the mob come after them. The problem is you can't control the mob, and you don't know what's going to upset the mob next. So today it's political content, and tomorrow it's something else, and you just don't know what that something else is. So that is why so many people now, after playing the cancel culture game for so long, have now said, I am just not going to acquiesce to it at all. I can't. Because even if we give them a little bit, like when Joe Rogan apologized for his past racist remarks, a lot of people were really mad and said, you apologize now, they're going to get you all the time moving forward. You're just never going to stop apologizing. They're going to keep coming after you. And an apology is not even what they want. They want you gone. And that is what YouTube has been facing, right? They face the mob that says, oh, YouTube. And I heard this all after Donald Trump won. There were a lot of targets on YouTube's back where they were saying, oh, look at this platform. They allow radical and fringe and far right people to spew misinformation. And that is why they started cracking down. But again, you think it's just politics. It won't just be politics. It never ends with just politics. Something else. And we can't even see what that future holds. And that's why it's best not to guess, and it's best not to even go down that road to begin with. Next time it's something else. I don't know. They're going to be banning kitten videos. I mean, really, right? Right now it's like the joke is, well, YouTube just wants to sanitize its platform so that it can be for puppy videos and kitten videos. Well, no, that's what's next. They're going to take that stuff down because the cancel mob's going to come after them and say that's animal rights abuse right there. You're violating animal rights by filming them without their consent and putting their faces all over for the world to see for an individual's gratification. For a human gratification, you are subjugating these animals to, like kitten porn, and they shouldn't be subjected to that. I mean, it sounds nuts, but come on, it doesn't sound that nuts. You know that this is like what's really legitimately next. We can joke around about it. But that is why it is not good to acquiesce to this from the beginning. And the fact of the matter is that the speeches that are at CPAC are every single speech that happened at CPAC is absolutely in the public's interest, newsworthy. Period. Bottom line, not debatable. Every single speech is newsworthy. And everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is, whether you like it or not, you could try to make that guy go away, but he's not going anywhere. So therefore, it's newsworthy. But they censored him even when he was the U.S. president. If they could censor the U.S. president when he was the U.S. president, what else can they do? And we see what they're doing. They're going after the press. They're going after the press. This is an attack on the press, and no one should be okay with it. So in the meantime, you can find Hills Rising on the website. This is where we will be posting. We're still doing shows every day. We're limiting on the radars a little bit until Thursday when we're back up, but we will be posting a lot of great segments to keep you up to date on the news, because we talk about a lot of stuff that's going on. So you can find us at the website, on the website, hill.com, and then just go to the TV tab. You can also find us on Facebook. We're there as well. A lot of this stuff is going to be posted. We're actually now talking about also potentially joining other platforms, so we'll let you know. But that is where you can find the show now, between now and Thursday. But Thursday we'll be back, and special surprise, Thursday I will be in studio. So you'll see the three of us actually live and in person, in flesh, together in the studio. So I will be flying out to DC. I was actually going to go there tomorrow for Monday's show, but because of all of this, I will be in the studio on Thursday. So it'll be a nice surprise. When we're all back, you'll see all three of our smiling faces in studio sitting next to one another. So hope to see you then. Thank you guys so much for watching. We got to end censorship. We cannot allow our country to become one of these, the great firewall of China style country. We don't want to have this great firewall in our country. We need to have a free press, a free people, a free society. And that means free speech, even speech you don't agree with, even speech you think is misinformation. That is what a free society is. That is the exact definition of a free society. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully we will see you on the website or on Facebook, or if you just want to wait it out, we'll see you Thursday on YouTube.